Today on The Occult Detective, I want to talk a little bit about book collecting. So I kind of wanted to show off the oldest book we have in our collection. If you're on BookTube, you love books. You love to read books, but a love of reading books is different than a love of books themselves. You can love to read and not be a collector, if you will. A lot of people catch and release. So what I'm going to show you very gingerly is the oldest book we have in our collection. This is a Scots Psalter, printed in 1781. It is in wretched condition. It's in Scots Gaelic, printed the year that the British surrendered to the American forces. You'll see that the spine is severely damaged. Shelf wear throughout. Text block is showing foxing and pitting and discoloration. This little book has seen better days. It was purchased in a small bookstore in Halifax, Nova Scotia, by a good friend of mine who was there visiting his son, who was teaching at the university there. And he brought that home and had it for 60 years when he passed it along to me. It's amazing. It's just an amazing little book. Unfortunately, the used bookstore placed this on the front, a sticky note that was not removed by my friend. He placed it into a bag and left it sealed because of its condition. And the glue has adhered itself to the leather, and it can be removed gingerly and with water, but I'm not going to do that. I have toyed with the idea of sending this off to someone who could do book restoration, someone like Amanda Buck. But then another part of me thinks, keep it as it is. Or pass it along to someone who might want to care for it. But that's the thing about book collectors. We have a hard time passing things on. Now, my wife and I started an online bookstore, Attic Pages, and at first we were purchasing things with the idea of selling them. And then slowly I decided it was time to downsize my personal collection. I'm not getting any younger, and I love and covet books, perhaps unhealthily, but If you're going to have an addiction, that's a pretty good one to have. That said, a large part of my collection has been in boxes or in piles on the floor, just because you only have so much shelf space. And what I've begun to do is look at my collection and say, first of all, am I ever going to reread this book? Whenever I can say no, I'm not, then it's time to pass it along, and that's what I've begun doing. Some books I will take to the grave with me. Probably more books than most people ever own in a lifetime. We've got thousands upon thousands of books in our house, in boxes, we've got a library in our attic. We've got a converted closet library. We have my den. We have my son's room where his growing book collection rests alongside a lot of my overstock, my overflow, a lot of fantasy that I just didn't have room for, and so I said, you should read these, and we began shelving them in his room. So, books, and more books. And I love them. I love the touch of them, the smell of them. Love everything about it. From a book that's from 1781 up to a new release. Books of yesterday tend to be more aesthetically pleasing than the print-on-demand trade paperbacks that kind of rule the roost these days. There are a lot of places that will sell very unique and beautiful editions, and I covet those highly. Unfortunately, a large portion of those, they're out of my price range. So I prowl used bookstores, estate sales, rummage sales, book warehouses. I go wherever old, discarded books end up. And I like to rescue them and repair them in minor fashions. And I like to now find like-minded people who have the same sickness and disease I do. And I like to make somebody's day finding a gentle treasure. When I find a book that's been discarded, misused, and sometimes just simple, the wear of book, especially a much loved book, that's as much a part of the book's history as it's the legacy of its printing and publication and such. So a book that is tattered and battered, roughly worn, in many ways means more to me than something freshly printed or something that has been meticulously cared for. Because was that book truly loved beyond, sitting on a shelf and being shown off? A book like this has been read hundreds upon hundreds of times, hence its condition. And so the oil from your hands, how many how many hands have held this book? How many have cracked it open and read it? Well, not that many. You'd have to be a Gaelic speaker, but you know what I mean. I take like a tattered paperback. Let's look over here. For instance, Jack L. Chalker, and the devil will drag you under. First of all, look at that. That's wonderful cover art, accentuated by the creases, the corner dings, the little wear of the spine. Somebody read this book more than once. Many somebodies read this book more than once. Why? Because it's a really great book. And so I would rather have this in this condition, which is still in pretty nice condition. But I would rather a book look like this than brand new. Because this tells me somebody liked this book. Maybe I will too. Makes me want to read it. Because obviously somebody cared enough to revisit it over and over again. And so it gets a little dinged up. And that's part of its history. And that's part of what I love about books. All right, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for stopping by. We'll talk again real soon.